welcome again Rabbi Yechiel Krish from Monsey, New York. He is a Rav and a Mashpia and a scientist. Maybe you can tell us again a little bit about what you do for this public lecture. And we thank him for coming all this long way to Australia. And especially at a time like this, where we are going through a very difficult time here in Australia. Rabbi Krish stopped in Sydney yesterday, and I met with him also, and we went to the Matzeh stone of Rabbi Eli Shlanga, Hashem Yikam Domei, and we went afterwards to hospitals to visit the injured. Busy a whole day from morning to night. The people in Sydney are doing it tough. We are close by. They appreciate the thoughts and the prayers of us here in Melbourne, and thank us for them that we have to continue. And that's why we dedicated this whole Yachikala program for this year to the schus of the holy martyrs, the Kedoshim, who perished, and to the refuah shleima u'kreira, to the complete and speedy recovery
Amen.
of those who need a refuah shleima. I don't remember all of their names. The names have been going around on the various chats that we should have them in mind, saying extra tehillim and giving extra tzedakah. When this terrible tragedy happened last Sunday, so then I asked Rabbi Krish, we were making the program of the lectures, if he could address in a few of the lectures about the current situation. And so we chose for the first topic, which seems like a negative topic. You have it here in front of me. It's a very negative picture. I didn't choose the picture. The Rebbe's response to tragedy. Today is the Yom Tov. Today is the 5th of Teves, the Dizan Notzach, the victory of the Rebbe's forums, the victory of Lubavitch. I'm not going to elaborate on it now. And a very positive day. And so why are we starting off with seemingly a negative topic? So the answer is very brief. I'm sure Rabbi Krish is going to dwell upon that. The Rebbe turned everything into a positive. Everything into a positive. You say the Rebbe's approach, and the Rebbe's shita, the Rebbe's position and philosophy is positivity. I leave the rest up to Rabbi Krish. I want to thank our sponsors. We have major sponsors, we have also other sponsors, Melbourne Office Supplies, Charity, plus others, specific days. We thank everybody who have committed themselves to sponsor up until now, and those who are coming forward and will come forward to join in and sponsor. And it's a very big mitzvah, as I said, that great is the mitzvah of communal Torah learning, and supporting it is a very, very great school, so very, very great merit. Please welcome Rabbi Yechiel Krish.
Hi, everybody. I have 3 microphones here. Am I supposed to use all of them? I'm attached to one. There's one there. Do I have to talk into this one? I should talk into this one. No, it doesn't matter. They all cover me. Okay, hi, everybody. It's better to have 3 than none, right?
They all go to the one place.
They all go to one hopes, right? It's not necessarily. It's not a for sure thing. Hello, wherever you are. As the rabbi indicated, I did not want to give this talk. This was not on our schedule, and we don't want to give these talks at all. Hashem is supposed to remove tears from the world. Mashiach is supposed to come, and this is supposed to be something that we study as ancient history. We will one day, very, very soon, in the next couple hours, in the next couple minutes, be dealing with this as something, as a theological study of prior Jewish tragedy. We will sit down and say, Mashiach's here. Isn't it interesting, as from a scholarly theoretical perspective, to think back to a world that suffered? That's what we are at right now. That's where we are. We're on the brink of a world where this is irrelevant. And it's the most horrible thing that I can imagine, the most horrible thing that I can think of, that right now this is relevant. It's not supposed to be relevant. Mashiach is supposed to be here. Mashiach should come before the end of this lecture. As the rabbi indicated, I was in Sydney yesterday with the rabbi. We went everywhere, and I had a day that lasted something like 50 hours, depending on where you are in the world. And we visited the Hakamas Matzeva of Rav Schlanger, Hashem Yikam Damei, and we visited a lot of people in hospitals, a lot of people who were waiting in hospitals to see about the recovery of their friends and family. And one thing that I saw and heard a lot of were reactions. I got to see and hear a lot of reactions to what's going on from a lot of different people, all of whom are entitled to their reactions. And all of whom I think had a slightly different take on what was going on. They, on the surface, are much more entitled to talk about this than I am. I'm coming to your country from a different country. I'm not from Sydney, I'm not from Melbourne, I'm not from Australia. Maybe you can tell. I'm from America. And here I am, I show up, I come into your town, and I tell you how we're supposed to deal with tragedy. The only way that I can justify this is, number one, I want to tell you what the Rebbe says. I want to tell you what the Nasi says. I want to tell you how a manhig, how the leader of the generation, has taught us to deal with tragedy, and how we're supposed to grow from it, how we're supposed to derive power from it, and how we're not supposed to fall victim to it. So number one, I'm just here to tell you what the Rebbe says. A lot of these are things you probably know. Hopefully they'll be presented here a little more coherently, but a lot of this is stuff you've heard before. The other thing though is that I don't live here, but we're one Jewish people. And I don't see a difference between a tragedy that happens in Sydney and Melbourne, in London, in America, or anywhere else in the world. When a bad thing happens, Rahman al-Islam, to the Jewish people, it should never happen again. It happens to all of us equally everywhere in the world. We're one body. And when a good thing happens, it happens to all of us equally everywhere in the world. So I'm here to share with you in the questions that we have, and in the suffering that we have, and in the sorrow that we have, and here to pray with you that this is the last one we ever have, and that Mashiach comes before the end of this discussion. The most important thing I want to tell you, as we start off, is that we don't have to do this alone. A lot of people believe, for some reason, I think because of the Yetzer Hara, there's no other explanation than it's that the Yetzer Hara, it's the evil inclination, tells us that when something horrible happens, nothing like this has ever happened before, this is completely novel, and we are not prepared to handle it. Jewish theology, Jewish philosophy has nothing that can prepare us for the modern tragedy in front of us. That is, this is new, and I don't have anything to help me. That obviously is not the case. We're experienced. We've been through this before. We have thousands of years of history of dealing with suffering, of dealing with tragedy, and of learning to grow from it and learning to become more powerful because of it. We don't have to go at it alone. It is the evil inclination that wants us to go at it alone. When we face tragedy, Rahman al-Islam, we face it with the collective weight of 2,000 years of Jewish people hugging us, holding us, and guiding us in the right direction. And that's what the Rebbe is going to give us. So without further ado, I have some slides. I don't usually like to put a lot of words on slides, but in this case, I'm going to move over here. Is that okay? Okay to be away from the microphone? We're fine? I have some notes. So, here I am moving from my notes in front of the slide. Maybe I'll move the, can I move? I shouldn't move this, though, because of the camera. I want to get out of the way.
Yeah, move it across.
Huh? I can move it across like this? Is that okay, cameraman?
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
He wishes I hadn't. You could tell. I'm so sorry. Right, I just want to get, people can see? My big head isn't in the way? Now you can't see from there. What am I supposed to do? I'll come back to the middle. I'm coming back. I'll just leave. In America you could see the slide. All right. There's a Gemara in Masechah Sukkah. I'm going to pace a little. That way everybody gets equally disadvantaged. There's a Gemara in Masechah Sukkah. It's on Chaf Tes, Daf Chaf Tes. That would be page folio 29. And the Gemara there says that when you see an eclipse, you should freak out. Freak out when you see eclipses. It goes back and forth. One opinion is that if you see a lunar eclipse, that means that the Jews should freak out because we are similar to the moon. Another opinion is that if you see a solar eclipse, the non-Jews should freak out because they're similar to the sun. They count their calendar according to the solar calendar. There's a whole back and forth on what to do with eclipses. One of the opinions in the Gemara, an unfortunate one, but one that rings true, unfortunately generation after generation, is that every time a Jew sees an eclipse, they should freak out, whether it's a lunar, a solar, or whatever other eclipses there are. When the stars do something funny, the Jews should freak out. And the Gemara says, why? The Gemara says we have a story. Once upon a time, there was a boy in class who always caused trouble and therefore always got smacked around by the teacher. We're not allowed to do that anymore, and people should not hit students. Back then, it was very common. So the kid always gets smacked around a lot. When the teacher walks into the room, who goes running? The student who usually gets smacked around a lot. And the Gemara says the Jewish people are used to milumadim v'makesem. We are used to being smacked around. Bad stuff happens to us all the time. We're used to it. And therefore, when we see the stars do something funny, it would make sense to suspect we're next on the list. That's the Gemara recognizing that we are milumin v'makesem. We are people who, throughout history, have taken quite a few hits. We're used to taking hits. This is something that's happened to us before. It's not going to happen to us again. Mashiach's coming, but it's something that's happened to us before. I have here on the screen a letter from the Rebbe to somebody who wrote that they were furious, enraged by the Holocaust, which I think is justified. But then they write that because they're enraged about the Holocaust, because nothing like the Holocaust has ever happened in Jewish history, and we are not prepared for this kind of tragedy, Jewish theology and philosophy cannot explain what to do with this kind of suffering. He's not willing to keep Torah and mitzvahs anymore, Rachmana litzlan. Because this is a new tragedy that we're unprepared for. He's also, out of consideration for those who were killed, out of sensitivity to them and their memory, he simply can't serve a God who would allow something like that to happen. Maybe you've heard these sorts of arguments before. The Rebbe has two responses. I want to show you the first one right here on the screen. So the Rebbe says, there is a prevalent misconception about the Holocaust, that it was something new and unprecedented and therefore requires an explanation which has never before been thought of. One could think that this is new tragedy. And by the way, when I first prepared this, I decided what I want to do is I don't want to talk about Bandai. I want to talk about tragedy in general. And then I realized, what am I doing here if I'm not talking about Bandai? So I guarantee you, one of the first things people did after the Bandai massacre, what are we calling it? Tragedy. Pogrom. I like that. I mean, I don't like that. I hate that, but I like the phrasing. No, because the reason why I like the phrasing is it makes it part of Jewish suffering in general, right? So after the Bandai pogrom, one of the first things people did was they started listing how unprecedented Bandai is. Nothing like this has ever happened in Australia. Nothing has ever happened to this scale. They started making the never has anything like this happened argument before. And the Rebbe nips that one right in the bud. Bad things happening to the Jewish people, that's not something new for us. It's part of a 2,000-year-old problem. It's part of the problem of exile. It's solved only by the coming of Mashiach. Every time we try to see something as a new challenge that's never happened before, that's the negative voice in our mind trying to tell us that we're suffering something unprecedented and therefore we cannot rely on our primary sources to guide us through it. We have 2,000 years of Jewish thought there to guide us through our problems. Nothing new is happening here, and the Rebbe says this even about the Holocaust itself. Nothing new here. The Rebbe says the only novelty to the Holocaust is that it revealed once and for all that truly civilized, truly intellectual, truly enlightened people can do horrible things to one another. That was new. But the scale of damage, the scale of pain, that's not something new for us. We had that during the destruction of both temples. We had that throughout Jewish history. It's not new. In truth, however, the only thing that's new about it is that it happened in the 20th century. The truth is, the only thing new about Bandai is that it's part of the continuing story of the Jewish people in exile that needs to end right now with the coming of Mashiach. It's not a new problem. And because it's not a new problem, that means we don't need new solutions. It means we can turn back to our sages, we can turn back to the Talmud, we can turn back to the Medrash, we can turn back to the works of Chassidus, and we can turn back to the works of our Rebbe and have advice for how to address this, because nothing new is happening. It's the same problem of exile, the same problem of suffering. Our primary text will stand by us. I mentioned to you earlier, I don't text while I'm driving. I have my notes on my phone, so I hope you'll forgive me for the, this is what it is when you're a millennial or forward, is that everything's on the phone. The big point there is that we are horrified when terrible things happen, but we're not theologically challenged by them. That is, we're horrified but not challenged, and that's an important distinction. Our faith is not shaken by a bad thing happening. That, unfortunately, has been the standard for 2,000 years. We suffer, we cry out, and we'll talk in a moment about how we do that in a kosher way and in a productive way, but we are not theologically challenged by it. So this person continues in their letter to the Rebbe that in honor of those who were killed, who were murdered in the Holocaust, he can't keep Torah and mitzvahs anymore. And the Rebbe says back, I don't understand. That's not how we handle tragedy at all. As a matter of fact, it's a somewhat selfish way to handle tragedy. The Rebbe says here, those who say that they cannot obey and fulfill the divine mitzvahs because of the Holocaust or because of whatever tragedy you want to fill in the blank on are only looking for an excuse. And it's a feeble attempt at self-justification in the face of a troubling conscience. They're trying to find a way out, but they're not trying to honor the victims. As the Rebbe says, moreover, to evoke the memory of sacred martyrs who lost their lives in the Holocaust for no other reason than that they are Jews does not reflect, in my opinion, an honest concern for them, if their sacred memory is used as an excuse to lessen one's commitment to our people and to our sacred heritage. Someone asked me earlier today, and you're probably in the room, I apologize for using you as a story, but it happened just a few minutes ago, about an hour ago. Somebody asked me an honest, sincere, and healthy question, which is that in order to pray effectively, we have to pray with fire, we have to pray with joy. And lately, said this person to me, I haven't been able to do that ever since Bandai. I'm sad. And every time I start to pray, I start to cry. How do I pray effectively when I'm so overwhelmed by my emotions? And I said back, the emotions are valid, the crying is valid. What we have to remind ourselves is that what I think and feel is not the most important thing in the world. What is right is most important. Helping people is most important. We have people right now who are in the hospital who need our prayers. And we have Kedoshim who are looking down on us and watching what we do. Everybody who directly was impacted by what happened in Bandai benefits from us praying with joy. It means that we may have to set aside our feelings and take into account the needs of the moment. The needs of the moment are exuberant joy in our prayer. The needs of the moment are complete dedication to God Almighty and to Torah and mitzvahs. And that matters more than the natural human emotions that we inevitably will have. Meaning it's right to feel sad, it's healthy to feel sad, but at the same time, if that sadness gets in the way of our practical performance of Torah and mitzvahs, we're missing the whole point. You know how the Rebbe ends this letter? I didn't put it on the screen, but the Rebbe ends this letter. I wrote it down over here. I want to read to you exactly what he says at the end. The Rebbe says at the end of this letter, I trust you will forgive me if I feel impelled because of what is at stake to add that the last remark is an understatement. That is to declare that using the memory of those who have passed, of those who died al Kiddush Hashem, to justify the fact that I can't pray properly, or to justify the fact that I can't serve God properly because I'm so sad or because I'm so overwhelmed, to use their memory in that way is an insult to their memory. We celebrate their lives, and we pray for the recovery of those who are still injured by doubling down on Torah and mitzvahs even though it feels horrible and even though it hurts like crazy. That's what we do. This isn't new. This is something we've experienced before, and most importantly, this isn't something we can let get in our way. So one of the things that we never do is compromise our Judaism because of a tragedy. I want to tell you another thing we don't do before I get to the proper list of things we do, which I hope will put things in a more positive direction. Things are unfortunate. Rabbi, I don't know how to do it without it getting heavy. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. We'll try. We try to keep ourselves joyous. On the list of things that we don't do, we don't justify God, we don't blame sin. This is a pretty common one after the Holocaust. The Rebbe talks about it at some length. Up here he says, the destruction of 6 million Jews in such a horrific manner that surpassed the cruelty of all previous generations could not possibly be because of a punishment for sins. Even Satan himself could not possibly find a sufficient number of sins that would warrant such a genocide. You have many answers from the Rebbe along these lines. We don't turn to sin. We don't turn to explaining. We don't make excuses for God. We don't make justifications. The Rebbe says that it desecrates the honor of those who died in the Holocaust by stating that the Holocaust happened because of their sins or because of any reason like that. We don't jump to make conclusions or excuses for God. God is a big boy. God can handle himself. We do not make excuses for what happened. I have another layer down here. Says, the only answer I can give is that only God knows. And then the Rebbe points out, the fact that I don't know why tragedy happens and the fact that I don't have a specific reason for any particular tragedy tells me I don't need that in order to be a successful Jew. We talked about this in our first lecture earlier today. One of the great principles of Judaism is that everything I need to be successful as a Jew, God has given me. Which means if something is hidden from the entire Jewish people, for example, the reason for Jewish suffering, we don't need that in order to be successful as Jews. It's not something that's necessary. It's something we would like. It's a taiva. It's an urge. We want to know why things happen. But we don't need to know, otherwise we would know. The truth is, right now, only God knows. This is something that Rebbe wrote to a lot of people who are coming up from Shiva, or after a Shleishim, which is where we are right now in Sydney. People feel sometimes, if Rahman al-Islam, you've experienced loss in some way, you might have felt this way before, that it's an insult to the memory of the deceased or an insult to the memory of a horrible thing that happened to move on. We got to continue dwelling because how can you, if I stop being mortified, if I stop being upset, if it stops breaking me, then somehow I've done a disservice to the memory of those who were hurt. That I've been letter after letter and in talk after talk reiterated the same idea we talked about a moment ago. If our goal is to wallow in our own misery, if our goal is to feel good or to feel what we want to feel, then I guess that's a valid approach. If our goal is to benefit the souls of the deceased, and if our goal is to pray for the recovery of those who are injured, we set aside the way we feel and we think about the truth of the situation. The truth of the situation is that the souls of those who, the Kedoshim, the souls of the Kedoshim who are not with us anymore, they are very much still with us. And the souls that are very much still with us, they would like us to serve God with joy and move forward with our lives. That's what they want. And therefore it is very, navel-gazing to continue to wallow in sorrow after the minimum time of mourning. We're expected to mourn for 7 days. We're expected to have a lesser series of mourning for the next 30 days. But at some point, when it is appropriate, we're expected to throw ourselves into a happy, exuberant, and chayastic, a lively Judaism. I will note that there is a terrible mistake that some Jews have made in prior generations, in the most recent generations, that we've created new days to celebrate's the wrong word, to commemorate Jewish tragedy. We have days like Holocaust Remembrance Day. We have days like Yom HaZikaron. And one of the great problems with creating these days is that this is objectively not Jewish. Objectively, we have always had Jewish suffering, we've always had bad things happen to us, and we've always made a priority of putting them on one day. Every single Tisha B'Av, we concentrate all of our fury and all of our grief into one day. For 24 hours we are miserable as we remember the suffering of the Jewish people for thousands of years, and the next day we go back to serving God with joy. Peppering days of misery throughout the calendar is not Jewish. We allot ourselves one day a year to focus on the suffering, and then every other day of the year we ping off that suffering and springboard off of it and use it for good. One day a year to commemorate, because the truth is, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is a day that commemorates the destruction of the temple, the exile that we're in right now, and the reason for all of these sorts of sufferings. It is the authentic Jewish approach when a horrible thing happens to compartmentalize it, to make it a part of our Judaism, but a small part of it, and to springboard off of it toward positive things, but not to dwell on it at length. It's just not what we do. And last on my list of knots, and here I have some stories finally, instead of just lecturing you about misery. We don't fall victim to survivor's guilt. There was a survivor of the Holocaust who saw his entire family and many of his friends butchered, murdered by the Nazis. Yimach shemam v'zichram. And he went from rabbi to rabbi and from source to source asking, can anybody help me cope with the simple guilt of being alive? Why me? What merit did I have? I wasn't better than anybody else. I wasn't holier. I don't think I have greater capacities. Why did God let me live when other people died? And he could not wrap his head around this. And apparently he went to many rabbis who did not help very much. Maybe they had answers, but they weren't the answers for him. He went to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose face is on the screen behind me, who my hat is covering. But there he is. And the Frierdiker Rebbe had one word answer to him, a couple words. And he wrote about this, that this single answer ended up putting his life in an entirely different direction. He went to the Frierdiker Rebbe and he said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, what schus did I have, what merit did I have that had me survive and everybody else die? What merit has me still here while my brothers and sisters are not doing as well somewhere else quite close to here? And the Frierdiker Rebbe responded, schus chayva. A merit? No, not a merit, an obligation. God keeps people on the board when they are obligated to do something about it. It's not a merit that someone is saved, it's an obligation that someone's saved. The fact that we are all here in this room, thank God, alive and well today, is specifically because we have a job to do. And everybody who was injured and should live long and be well at this point has an obligation, a job to do. It's not a merit that saved them, it's a chayva, it's an obligation that saves them. This I got to see firsthand yesterday. We went to visit Rebbe Lazaroff in the hospital. And I got to tell you, how do I say? I don't know how to say this. I don't have language for this. I don't have words. I don't want to tell you all should go to Label to experience this. But honestly, maybe you should go to Label to experience this. I was by Label. Maybe you should. I was by Rebbe Lazaroff, and I live in Muncie, and in Muncie we have a surplus of Rebbes. Everybody and their cousins are Rebbe. We have 1,000 Jewish courts in Muncie. Really, I don't think there's a single Hasidic court that doesn't have a representative in Muncie somewhere acting as Rebbe for that sect. And so I know a thing or two about people walking through a room to visit a spiritual authority. This was like walking into Label's hospital room. You walk into Label's hospital room, he's lying in bed, the sheets pulled up to his neck because his injuries are grievous and considerable, and nobody wants to see them, including him. So his sheets are pulled up to his neck. He looks okay, but obviously he's in incredible pain. He told us that his pain is at a 9 perpetually out of 10. He's not doing well. Thank God, with God's help, he's expected to make a complete recovery. We should all, amen, right? Amen. She's going to have a refuah shlema. However, he's not having a good day. There was a line of people coming in, a lot of them not yet frum, a lot of them with no yarmulkes on their heads. They would walk up next to his bed, he would hold their hand, and he would whisper words of encouragement into their ears. They came thinking that they were visiting him and encouraging him. He ended up talking to them about Torah and mitzvahs, giving them inspiration, teaching them Torah, telling them to put on tefillin. I think you might have seen there was a news story recently. He lit menorah with a nurse and gave them a bar mitzvah. They wheeled him outside. It's like people going to see a font of inspiration. We had to wait in line for our chance to meet the tzaddik label. And when I finally got up next to him, I gave him my hand to shake too. And he leaned in, he said, these people, they keep on coming thinking that they're going to comfort me. How dare they comfort me? My job is to comfort them. This is someone who understands this idea perfectly. Label understands this idea perfectly. And you know what? I think there's a lot of clarity among a lot of the people. I didn't meet all of them, but a lot of the people who were injured, who were there, understand, not as chosacheva. Label says to me, what's my job in this world? Why did God spare me? Obviously because it's my job to inspire these people. And there's a revolving door of people coming in, putting on tefillin with Label. Some of them for the first time, shaking his hand and hearing words of inspiration from somebody who is clearly in a lot of pain and clearly has a road of recovery ahead of him. This is the way that a Jew responds to tragedy, especially when it happens to them. Maybe you should visit him. I think it's something maybe worth seeing. I've never seen anything like it. We went to visit Rav Ullman yesterday. And we went hoping that we were going to get to talk to Rav Ullman. I mean, I've known about him for years. How do you say you're an enormous fan of a rabbi? But I'm an enormous fan. I mean, his work is incredible. And I was looking forward to meeting him, obviously under happier circumstances. We went in to sit with him in his office, and I expected we'd get to talk a little. We didn't get to talk at all. Remember why we didn't get to talk, Rabbi? Because the rabbi mentioned that there was somebody in a hospital who needed something. Rav Ullman got on the phone and didn't stop trying to get this person the thing they needed for the next period of time that we were available. Somebody who clearly is suffering immensely, somebody who clearly went through something horrible, who isn't able to put down the phone because he's taking care of everybody else. Not a schosacheva. This is something that they understand. The trick is making sure we understand it too. They're very proximate. Maybe it's easier to understand when you're close. We're a little further out here, and my family's a little further in America. I think we all need to understand it's not a schosacheva. We have to look at the situation and ask, what can I do? What am I expected to do? To work. We waited to visit some people in the hospital, and we didn't actually get to see them. They were in the ICU, and we weren't able to see the people who were sick. But while we were in the waiting room, we ran into a very large group of Israelis. And they were all eating falafel. There was this table set up. It was the most Israeli thing I've ever seen in my life. Bunch of Israelis, all speaking Hebrew, there to visit Geffen Beton. And they were in this line across they had a bunch of falafel in front of them, which is just like a little on the nose for me. Like, do Israelis eat other things? And they're there with their falafel, right? They're there with their falafel. And every single one of them wanted to put on tefillin. They waited in line to put on tefillin in the merit that their friend should recover. These are people who understand not a schosacheva. What can I do? It's an obligation. It puts the onus on me to be better. We met so many people yesterday who understood this, Rabbi. I don't know how well I understood it till I saw it on other people's faces. This is something I got from Sydney yesterday. This idea. Not a merit, an obligation. Okay, that's what we don't do. We went through what we don't do. We certainly don't wallow in our own misery. We don't allow our feelings to overwhelm our need to do the right thing. We're mission-oriented. We are obligation-oriented. We do what needs to be done, even if it doesn't always feel good. We recognize that this is not a new problem for us, that the central problem is exile. We recognize that Mashiach needs to come now. We understand now what we don't do. The question is, what do we do, right? It's very easy to list all the wrong ways to approach Jewish tragedy. What I want to spend the rest of our time together doing is talking about the right ways to do it. Of course, in the Rebbe's Torah. Rabbi, was it at the Hakamas Matzeva that the Rav Ullman mentioned? It was at the Hakamas Matzeva. Rav Ullman, when they were revealing the headstone for Rav Schlanger, Hashem Yikom Dameh, he mentioned a verse that the Navi says, the prophet in Eicha, I believe, right? He mentioned the Navi, Yirmiyahu, says, "Why have you permanently forgotten us, God?" Cries out to God. Cries out to God in what could be seen as a disrespectful way. And Rav Ullman mentioned it to say that we are justified in crying out. There is a kosher way to cry out. There is not a theological problem or Jewish religious problem with expressing our anguish in a way that reflects truth and reflects the words of our prophets. Therefore, number one, we are authorized to cry out, but we cry out in a very specific way. As a matter of fact, sometimes when the Jewish people cry out, that's the last thing we need for Mashiach to come. As we know, from the generation that left Egypt, when they finally cried out to God because of the terrible labor they were experiencing, that's what God heard that finally led him to redeem them. So crying out in some way is some of the most productive things we can do. This is a very old idea, that we are legitimate in our crying out, and we cry out when something bad happens, Rahman al-Litzlan, in a kosher way and in a healthy way, and in a way of truth. There's Gemara Maseches Yuma. It's on Samach Tes Amud Beis. I think I put it on the screen. I did. Have you heard of the Anshe Knesset Agdela, the men of the Great Assembly? Yeah. Right, they're called the men of the Great Assembly. How do you get that title? You know, no one calls me that. No one calls me Rabbi Yechiel Krish of the Great Assembly. I don't know, was there a Great Assembly? Turns out there wasn't. Turns out there wasn't a Great Assembly, and turns out there wasn't a degree that makes you one of the members of the Anshe Knesset Agdela. The reason why they were called the men of the Great Assembly, as opposed to just, the men of the assembly, is based on a Gemara Maseches Yoma. As the Moshe Rabbeinu said about God, that God is Hakel HaGodol HaGibor VeHanora. That God is great, He's powerful, and He's awesome. Those are all three bad translations, but we'll allow it for now. Godol, Gibor, and Nora. The three great things about God Almighty. Moses calls God this. Jeremiah sees the destruction of the temple, sees horrible things happening to the Jewish people, sees them displaced from their land, sees the upcoming exile that's going to be causing us so much pain, which of course is about to end. And Yirmiyahu says, I don't see awesome. I see Gadol and Gibor. He's great, he's strong, but he's not awesome. And he took that word out of his praises of God. And Yirmiyahu said, from now on, he's Hakel HaGadol HaGibor. Period. Daniel, who lives in the time of exile, in the times of Nebuchadnezzar, he sees the Jewish people struggling under the yoke of a foreign government and God doing nothing about it, at least on the surface. And he says, Daniel, the great prophet, says, I can't handle this. God is not all that strong. He doesn't appear that strong. I don't see His strength. I don't think he said God isn't strong, but I don't see His strength. If I don't see His strength, He's Hakel HaGadol. He's big, but I don't see the power and I don't see the awesome. And they reduced God's name again to the God who is big. The Anshe Knesset Agdela, the men of the Great Assembly, they said, we disagree. We see the world a little bit differently. The fact that God has not utterly destroyed the nations of the world for what they've done to us shows that He can control His anger. He is indeed powerful. And the fact that Hashem protects the Jewish people around the entire world and keeps us alive, that is indeed awesome. And they reinstituted Hakel, HaGadol, HaGibor, VeHanora, and they put God's titles back in place. And that's how they got to be known as the men of the Great Assembly, the men who restored God's greatness. HaGadol, HaGibor, VeHanora. The Gemara asks a question there. What authority did two prophets have in diminishing God's name? That does not seem like the sort of thing you're supposed to do in response to tragedy. We're talking about the healthy ways to respond to tragedy. One of them probably isn't changing the prayer book. Jeremiah goes in and goes, God, you're not so awesome. Gadol HaGibor. Are you kidding me? Daniel comes in and says, actually, Gadol, but not Gibor. What? That's not Jewish, that's not kosher, what's going on? Rebbe Eliezer has an answer. Actually, he asked the question, the Rabbanan give the answer. The Rabbanan answer. They did it this way. How did they do it this way? Rebbe Eliezer is the one who gives the answer. I'm sorry, I was trying to find the verse. Here we go. They knew that God is the God of truth and that they shouldn't lie to Him. That's Rebbe Eliezer answer. They were speaking from the heart. They said, I can't call God powerful if I don't see His power. I can't call God awesome if I don't see His awesomeness. And therefore they approached God with truth. The Rebbe has a talk that's up on the screen here. It's from Sichas Kedesh. It's from the year, I'll have to do some math, Lamed Daled, which would be 1974, volume 2, page 182. The Rebbe comments on this piece of Talmud, and he says, for those who wonder how it's possible to express oneself in such way, how can you remove Gibor and Nora from God's titles? This type of talk is rooted in the Talmud. Given their position, these attributes were not then manifest. According to those people living at that time, Yirmiyahu and Daniel, I couldn't see that part of God. They could not say them in their prayers, as this would constitute speaking a falsehood unto God, and they understood God doesn't want our false praise. And the same is true in our instance, that when we see an occurrence that is utterly incomprehensible, we must say the truth, that the matter is utterly incomprehensible, and therefore we cry out. Says the Rebbe, from this Gemara I learn that I'm justified in turning to God and saying, I just don't see the awe right now, please bring Mashiach now. I just don't see the power right now, please show us your power. There is a kosher way to cry out. It doesn't require us to sit quietly and say, look God, you know what you're doing. Crying out is one of the core principles of Judaism when it's done in a way of truth, when it's done in the models of the prophets, and when it's done for a tayelis, for a productive outcome of God giving us Mashiach, of God giving us a better world. When individuals suffered, the Rebbe always used the comfort of Hamakim Yinachem Eschem B'Seich Shara Ve'Letzion V'Yerushalayim. I'm sure you've heard this one before. Unfortunately, it's one of the things that we say in Shiva houses. This is the traditional line of comfort for the Jewish people. In many, many letters, where the Rebbe would try to comfort somebody who was suffering, the Rebbe would tear apart this particular line and explain why it's supposed to be comforting. And allow me to just set up the question. It's up on the screen. I'm not going to read it. You can read it yourselves. But I do want to set up the question. You go to somebody who's suffering, Rahman al-Itzlan. They're in terrible pain because something bad happened to them. Person lost a loved one. That's where you meet them in a Shiva home, right? A person loses a loved one. So you go over to them and you say, may God comfort you. Among all the other people who are suffering, you're not the only one with this problem. Among the many, many other, in Jerusalem and Zion and the entire Jewish history, your problem is a problem, but the truth is, may God comfort you among the bigger issues that we frankly have grow up. That's the way the verse reads. And obviously that's ridiculous. That's the Rebbe's question. The Rebbe's question on this, again and again, he does this again. He does this in like 15, 16 different letters. The same basic question. This does not seem to be a comforting line. But then the Rebbe explains it is indeed a very comforting line. Number one, we are telling a mourner with the traditional phrase, which I guess I should translate. It means that God should comfort you among all of the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. First of all, we say to them, you're not alone. When one Jew suffers, every Jew suffers. When a Jew in Sydney, Rahman al-Islam, is hurt, that hurts the Jews on all of Australia, it hurts the Jews around the entire world. We're all suffering together, we're all mourning together. You're not alone. So step one is, you are not alone. Step two is, your problem is not a unique problem, and therefore it does not have a unique solution. The same way that God has guaranteed that one day He is going to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, and when He rebuilds the Beis HaMikdash, it brings Mashiach, He's going to explain Jewish suffering throughout history in a way that is satisfactory to us. That will be the same case with every individual who's ever suffered. If any individual is suffering, God will explain to that individual why it happened in a way that is satisfying to them. The Rebbe quotes a verse here, it's a verse that's very hard to wrap our heads around, but it is the only intellectual response to tragedy. And so it's worth spending some time on right now. We believe firmly that everything that God does is good. Because God is good. Teva tev lehetiv. Good can only produce good. Which means that every horrible thing that's ever happened to us was good. Wrap your head around that. I can't. And you know what else? None of us can, yet. One of the guarantees of Mashiach, one of the things we're looking forward to most with the coming of Mashiach, is that when Mashiach comes, we have a prophecy that tells us, I will thank God for all of the suffering I went through. God will make it so clear why He did everything He did, and so clear that it was good for me and good for society and good for everyone involved, that we'll celebrate the horrors. I cannot conceive of that. And it's not healthy to do right now because it hasn't been explained to us yet. But this is one of our core beliefs. One of the core beliefs of the Jewish people is that when Mashiach comes, it will be made clear that this was a good thing. That's something that God will do on a national level among Zion and Jerusalem, but it's also something He'll do to every individual mourner. Everybody who's ever lost anyone or anything, everyone who's ever been sad for any moment, God will turn to them and explain to them why it was good in such a satisfactory way that they will say thank you. It'll be that satisfying. He won't give you an excuse and you'll go, well, that's an excuse, but I'm still miserable. It'll be that good. That's one of the promises of the Mashiach. One of the miracles of Mashiach is a true explanation for Jewish suffering. Not just an explanation, but one that makes us go, Hashem, great job, God. I'm so glad you were angry at me. That's what that means. We can't understand it now, but we're going to understand it one day. In some very old Jewish books, there's a metaphor for this, the tapestry metaphor. You've heard the tapestry metaphor before? I must tell you, because I need to lighten things up at least a little bit, because I got to tell you, it's a heavy topic. And I'm not a heavy person by nature. But you have to be for this, right? I was on a panel one time. I get to go on a lot of these panels when I travel where they put a bunch of rabbis up on a stage and they do like a crossfire where they ask the rabbis the hard questions. A guy's sitting next to me and he gets asked, why do bad things happen to good people? Which is one of the classics, right? I mean, it's one of the classics. It's honestly what we're addressing right now. Why do bad things happen to good people? And the correct answer is, we don't know. Mashiach will explain why when He comes. And for now, we trust that God is good, and we suffer and we build. We feel what we feel, and we're productive. That's essentially the right answer. This guy, who's standing on the stage next to me, sitting on the stage next to me, very important not to tell you who he is, because I'm about to say something sort of funny about him. He says, in my grandmother's house, there was a tapestry on the wall. And I always looked at that tapestry and I wondered, what's on the other side of the tapestry? So one day, I, as a mischievous child, turned the tapestry around, only to find that on the bad side of the tapestry, where there's no beautiful picture, there are a bunch of ugly hanging threads. And then I understood why bad things happen to good people. Now, the reason why this is ridiculous is because he was quoting one of the oldest parables for theodicy in the entire Torah. I don't know why he had to make this a story about him and his grandma, but it just blew my mind. I don't know why this has to be about us, but this is a very, very old parable. It's a very old one. A tapestry on one side is beautiful, on the other side it's hanging strings. In the world we live in right now, we can only see the hanging strings. So we see a hanging string, and we mourn the hanging string. We feel pain because of the hanging string and the ugly picture behind. When Mashiach comes, God flips the tapestry and shows us the good, and we're so satisfied by the tapestry that we agree with the hanging strings. Impossible to wrap our heads around now, but part of our core faith, part of our core belief. This is intellectually how the Rebbe wants us to approach, and how Torah itself wants us to approach tragedy. With faith that it's good, but with an understanding that we can't see the good yet. I guess so. But really more than I just want to add, yes and, even more than Gamzu L'Teva is this big point that the Rebbe keeps on bringing up, which is that it will be shown to be good, but not fast enough. Now. Not Gamzu L'Tova. We need Mashiach now to show us the truth that it's good now. I believe it, but don't make it an article of faith for me, God. Bring Mashiach now and show me now. Flip the tapestry today. So just yes and. Gamzu L'Tova now. This is where I want to go. All right, this one will upset all of you. Just to make you angry at me. I think this one is the toughest pill to swallow of all. What you do about it. We'll talk in a second about how we live as better Jews because of it and how we springboard our own Avodas Hashem in it. But before that, I want to talk about prevention. I want to talk about what we do when something bad happens. And I got to tell you, everywhere that I traveled yesterday, I heard 1,000 bad ideas. That's what I heard. I heard a lot of bad ideas. Is that the reason why this happened is because of the political climate in Australia right now. The reason why this happened is because we have bad governments and bad people running the country, or people running the country inefficiently. The reason why this happened is because there are too many guns or not enough guns. All the reasons that don't strike to the core reason that the Rebbe wants us to focus on. After a tragedy, especially a tragedy involving actual violence, where people get hurt or people almost get hurt, the Rebbe's answer is constant and universal. The reason why bad things happen, the reason why people do bad things, the reason why the nations of the world hurt each other is because of a lack of education for the nations of the world. That a moral people don't do this. That moral non-Jews who are taught not to kill or taught to use their words and not their hands don't hurt the Jewish people, and that our form of prevention is not necessarily new legislation, although feel free to make a keli if you like, or fighting the politics of the time, feel free if that makes you happy, but that the greatest way that we can productively make sure that non-Jews don't hurt Jews anymore is by educating non-Jews. Specifically through the Noahide laws, the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, where we educate the world about morality, and specifically through instilling in our educational system actual morality. As the Rebbe complains about again and again when it comes to American public schools, I don't know what exactly goes on in your public schools here, but in America we have a very strong separation of church and state to the point that we can't have any kind of prayer in public schools. The Rebbe repeats again and again, how do you expect to make a moral nation of people who don't shoot each other if you're not teaching them morality and you're only teaching them mathematics? After Ronald Reagan, the president who's depicted on the screen over here, was nearly assassinated, the Rebbe gave multiple talks and wrote multiple letters on this same topic, saying what brings a person to try to shoot a president instead of talking out their problems? And he says it's because the educational system is telling people you're powerful, you're intellectual, you can do whatever you want with that power, go take by force and try not to get caught. That's the core message of most public educations. Why are we not talking about morality in schools? So practically speaking, while I'm sure that there is room for discussions of how we need to change the way that we're doing politics, now we need to change the way that we're doing security, now we need to change the way that we're doing guns, yes or no, these are footnotes for a Jew. Our biggest concern is that we need to change the way we're talking to non-Jews. We need to change the way that the non-Jewish people in this world, in this country and in this world are educated, that their education should be an education with morality. We need to be promoting the idea that in their schools there should be discussion of morality, of God, and of accountability in a cosmic sense. And most of all, we need to double down on the Rebbe's mission to spread the 7 Noahide laws to the entire world and to tell our non-Jewish friends and neighbors and educate them in a very large way that there's a God that they're accountable to and 7 laws they're expected to uphold, and one of them is don't murder.
What if they believe that their God tells them to do that?
Yeah, Islam, the whole idea of Islam.
We're talking about regular people.
They're anti-God. They still know. They still believe in one. They still believe in one God. They believe that the one God.
If the question is what do I do with people who keep one of the Noahide laws but not the other, the answer is to teach them the other a lot more effectively. I will tell you, there are certainly Muslims in the world who would never murder somebody.
Yeah.
There's a way to educate within that religion. And by the way, we do not advocate the existence of any other religion. But even the monotheistic ones, we don't advocate its existence. It violates one of the Noahide laws to have a structured formal religion, even if it's monotheistic. So we're not a fan of the fact that these other religions exist in religious form. That's not the end goal of the world. However, I will say, there is certainly a way to educate people who believe in one God to also believe in not murdering. There's a way to do it. And I hate to put the onus on us so heavily, but I will remind you of this very central idea. You've probably heard before that we're a light unto the nations, yes? That means that if it's dark out there, whose job is it to light it up? If I see a dark world, the answer is I'm not shining my light the way I'm supposed to. This doesn't, God forbid, mean that it's our fault when bad things happen. But it does mean that it's my responsibility to make the world brighter. If there's a part of the world that glorifies the death of Jews, it's partially my job to shine a light there. It really is. And there are ways to do it. There are ways to do it. Part of my responsibility, I can't just I really can't step back and go, you know what, this is a broken religion with a broken group of people who have broken ideas, and I guess God will just have to protect me. God put me here as a priest to the entire world. We are a nation of priests, a nation of people who are supposed to be teaching morality to everybody, including them, which means that we need to find a way to explain to them this is not how you handle your differences. It's partially on us. It's partially on us to make them. I'll have to take questions after, but absolutely, if you don't mind, because I have to get through this, but I'd be very happy to take the question after. It is absolutely our responsibility to educate them as well, to educate everybody, to find ways to make them listen. Oh. Well, you know. Questionable whether I should have that on a slide. But anyway. I want to talk practical for a moment. We've addressed what we don't do. We've addressed ideologically, intellectually how we handle tragedy. We've addressed how we emotionally handle tragedy. And we also have addressed specifically what we're expected to do practically to prevent future tragedy. What we haven't discussed is probably the most important point, and so I wish I'd saved a little more time for it. Maybe you'll let me go over 5 minutes. But we haven't addressed the most important point, which is what do I do now? What do I do right now? And what I do right now is I build. Obviously what I do right now is I build. This is a very old idea. A very old idea. Probably the oldest idea we have in Judaism is that when something horrible happens to the world, what God wants us to do is to rebuild specifically on that site in a stronger and more powerful way. The tragedy should be the catalyst for growth in a particular area, and that particular area should have a certain poetic justice to it. That it should match the theme and the place and the time of the tragedy that happened. The oldest source for this is the flood story. The entire world gets destroyed. God wipes out the entire world, except for Noah, his family, and a couple animals on a boat. And when Noah lands, and he gets out and sees that the entire world has been destroyed, objectively the greatest tragedy in world history, right? The whole world was wiped out. It doesn't really get worse than that. God turns to Noah and says, here's what I want you doing next. Look at the verse. God says to Noah, leave the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives. And now all the animals, they need to get out too. They leave with you so that they will swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. The first thing God says to people and to animals that have survived incredible tragedy is, grow, I want more of you. The Meshech Chochmah notices this, by the way, has a commentary on this verse in the Torah saying that this is God telling us that we need to rebuild a world on top of every broken world. And that every time we see a broken world, we have an ancient commandment going back to Noah to rebuild on top of a broken space. We have some sources that go further in the Torah on this. You might remember this piece of Talmud from Tractate Sota on 12a. The Jewish people are experiencing the worst tragedy in Jewish history up until that time, the enslavement in Egypt. And Pharaoh has decided that he's going to take Jewish children, Rahman al-Islan, and murder them wholesale. At that point, he's bathing in their blood to try to solve a skin condition. And the Jewish people make a decision. Amram, the leader of the generation, the Rebbe of that time, makes a decision that we're not going to have any more children. Why make more children just for Pharaoh to destroy? So he separates from his wife, all the Jewish people separate from their wives, and the Jewish people decide, on top of this tragedy, we will not build. We're done. No more building. Something horrible happened. We're not building on tragedy. We're going to wallow, and we're going to cease to exist on our own terms. And Miriam pops up, and she's a little kid. And Miriam says to her father, your decree is harsher than Pharaoh's decree. For two reasons. Number one, Pharaoh has decreed he's going to kill Jewish boys. You are making sure there'll be no more Jewish boys or girls. And number two, Pharaoh has decreed that Jewish children will die in this world, but that they'll still have a life in the next world. They'll have died al-Kiddush Hashem. You're denying them the opportunity to be born in the first place. You're worse than Pharaoh. Her father hears what she says, kisses her on her head, and rejoins up with his wife, and immediately after that, Moses is born. Moshe Rabbeinu.
And she gets young again.
That's the only way she could have done it, right? She was pretty old. And they have a baby. They have Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Redeemer of the Jewish people, is born from the conviction that on top of tragedy we build, we don't stop. Just because the story goes on, it gets a little funny. Later on, they come for Moshe, and they have to put Moshe into a basket, and they send Moshe up the river, and Amram comes over to Miriam and smacks her on the head and says, "What happened to your big idea? Now Moshe's down the river." Later on, though, he turns out okay. Miriam gets kissed on the head in part 1 and smacked on the head in part 2. But in the end, she was right. It's a very old idea that we build on top of tragedy. After the Holocaust, this was a big theme by the Rebbe. This letter up here was written to Eli Wiesel. Eli Wiesel says that the Rebbe would never stop bothering him about building a family. Every letter he wrote to the Rebbe would say something back along the lines of, and make sure to get married real quickly and make some children. You got to make up for what was lost in the Holocaust. He says the Rebbe was a little bit oppressive about this, that it got to be aggressive at some point. That when he wrote to the Rebbe he was finally married, the Rebbe wrote back something like, "Well, finally." The Rebbe really pushed Eli Wiesel to get married and have children and rebuild his life after the Holocaust. I have one example of these letters on the screen to give you an idea of the way the Rebbe talks about this. The Rebbe says, "With all the conviction that I can muster, I want to tell you that although it's important to tell the younger generation about tragic experiences and losses suffered, I guess it's important to spread the message that Eli Wiesel was spreading about the horrors of the Holocaust, the terrifying memories and ordeals. In my estimation," says the Rebbe, which means a lot, I think, "the main calling of our times is to make an effort to establish a Jewish home and family, which will certainly contribute to the downfall of Hitler. If you really want to beat our enemies, you beat our enemies by making Jewish families and making more Jews, more authentic Jews, practicing authentic Judaism. We build on top of the tragedy, and we build in response to the tragedy. This is how we respond when something horrible happens to us, by making something beautiful in its place." There was a meeting. The UJA brought youth directors to the Rebbe. They were about to go on a trip to Warsaw, and they asked the Rebbe about their trip to Warsaw. They said they've been studying a lot of Holocaust history in 1962, and they're really starting to feel a little bit down because of it. And the Rebbe writes, "If you influence a Jew to not become assimilated, but to profess his Jewishness, his pride and inspiration and joy, this is defeating Hitlerism. If you want to know how we respond to something like Bandai, if you want to know how we respond to the Holocaust, if you want to know how we respond to any terrible thing that's happened to the Jewish people, it's by influencing a Jew not to become assimilated." And that's the opposite of what a lot of the, intellectuals tell us to do. My parents just sent me a message saying, apparently down the street from us there was a car thing that happened. Or did you read about this? Yeah, my parents sent me a message like, right, you better be careful. Better be careful. That better be careful is not Jewish. I mean, you have security if you like. Better be careful. God forbid to take your yarmulke off. God forbid to bring the mezuzah inside or two. Have you seen this? They've done this thing now where you can disguise your mezuzah as a home security system so that nobody knows there's a mezuzah on your door. This is not how we win. We win by walking down the street as open, proud Jews. We win by not being afraid. We win by not assimilating. We win by not hiding our Judaism. This is what we do. On top of the tragedy, we build an open and proud Judaism. It's the oldest idea. It goes back to Noah. It goes back to Miriam. But it's very practical here too. If you influence a Jew to not become assimilated, to profess his Jewishness, his pride and inspiration and joy, this defeats Hitlerism. If someone does his best in his personal life to be Jewish, so that everyone sees that in the street he is a Jew, that is openly Jewish, obviously Jewish in the street. You know how many people told me after what happened, make sure when you go to Australia you wear a baseball cap? God forbid. God forbid. You can wear a baseball cap. Don't wear a baseball cap. Everyone sees in the street that he's a Jew, that his home is a Jewish home, that there's a mezuzah on his door, and it's a real mezuzah that is obviously a mezuzah, that he's proud that it's not a burden, but his pride, his life defeats Hitlerism. That's how you defeat Bandai. That's how you defeat terrible Jewish tragedies. By showing that we're proud, by being loud and open about it, by not assimilating and by not hiding. The Jewish people don't hide. We build on top of our tragedy. We build bigger than we had before. This is my last slide, Rabbi. I'm so sorry for going over. The Alter Rebbe one time wrote a letter to someone who had experienced a fire. And he told the person who experienced that fire to rebuild their house in the same place the fire happened. And he explained why using Kabbalah. You might know your Spheris a little bit. You mind a little bit of Kabbalah? A little bit of Kabbalah? We're okay. We're all Kabbalists? Today we're all Kabbalists. We have Chesed, which is kindness, bad translation. Gvura, which is stringency, also bad translation. Tferes, which is beauty. Allow me for now, okay? Kindness, severity, mercy. Just for the purposes of our current discussion. That's the order that God influences the world in. First he brings Chesed, then he brings Gevura, then he brings Tferes. As explained by the Tzemach Tzedek through the Alter Rebbe's letter, when God brings kindness into a certain place, it is inevitable that eventually he will bring Gevura into that place, because first comes kindness and then comes stringency. Which means that in a place of incredible beauty, like a Hanukkah celebration in Bandai, it is somewhat inevitable, God forbid it should be like that, but it's somewhat inevitable that in a place of kindness and beauty, there shouldn't be some degree of divine stringency on top of that. However, the next thing that comes into the world, right after the stringency, is Tiferes, a much more powerful beauty, a much more powerful kindness, a much more powerful God-light than existed before. The order of creation is, there was something okay here. It became bad here, and the next thing that happens on this very spot is something glorious. That's the order of creation, and therefore, if you want to know where to build after a tragedy, right where the last tragedy happened, because that's a place that's been primed for something incredible to happen. Therefore, there is a tradition that when somebody's house burns down, it ends up being a segula, it ends up being a sign that they're going to become incredibly wealthy. It's an old Jewish expression, when a house burns down, wealth follows. Because in a place where there's gevura, you can expect Tiferes to show up next. In a place where something horrible happened, we can expect something that is commensurate in its beauty and power to show up. I can't think of anything. I can think of a few things, unfortunately. I can't think of many things as horrific as what happened in Bandai, which means I can't think of a stronger gevura. If that's the power of that gevura, imagine what Tiferes is waiting for us on that very site. Which means we build right there. It means we build something new and beautiful and Jewish directly on the site of our greatest tragedy. Because that place is now primed. Because Gevura went there, the next big step there is a Tiferes. And so our job is to build, and our job is to build specifically where the horrible thing happened. I want to just conclude by making it practical. We've talked theoretically, we've talked about the Holocaust, we've talked about other Jewish tragedies, I've woven in Bandai a little bit, but I don't get to get up here and tell you about Jewish suffering and not talk about the one in front of us. I hope we've learned today some of the invalid responses to the horrible thing that happened. And some of the valid ones and some of the obligatory ones. We're not going to wallow in our misery, however tempting it is. We're not going to, God forbid, flag in our observance of Torah and mitzvahs, because that is selfish. If we want to benefit the Kedoshim, if we want to benefit those who are still sick, we do it by adding in our Torah and mitzvahs, not by giving in to our own sorrow. We don't let it overpower us because we are mission-oriented. We're here not as a schus, but as a chayva. It's not a merit to be here, it's an obligation to be here. We're going to mirror the people who survived, the people who are in the hospital right now, the people like Rebbe, who are inspiring everybody from their place of pain. And we're going to live as though we are obligated to do good with the fact that God gave us more life and gave us more time. We're going to bring Mashiach with these sorts of things. We're not going to wallow. When it comes to our theological, intellectual approach to what happened, how could this happen? Why did this happen? All I know for sure is that it's good. I need Mashiach to explain to me how. I cannot fathom how, but I believe firmly that this, along with every negative thing that's ever happened to us, is good, and I'm expecting Mashiach to come and explain it. Emotionally, how do I handle it? I cry out to God in a kosher and honest way, echoing the words of the prophets. How do I practically make sure that things like this don't happen again? By increasing education, by spreading the Noahide laws, by promoting morality in the world at large, even when it's incredibly difficult and seems impossible. There's no such thing as a true barrier to a Jewish person's job. It lacks creativity, not ability. If we're creative, we can find a way to teach even the people who do not like us to be moral about their dislike. Oh, you can't make them like us. Halacha Esav Senes Yaakov. The Jewish law is that they won't like us, but we can teach them not to be immoral about it. We can teach them to make it a theoretical, we can teach them to use their words, not their hands. I've taught my kids to do it, sometimes. You know, some of the time. I tell you what I've been successful at. Whenever one kid hits the other kid, the other one goes, only a non-Jew hits, Jews use their words. So I've succeeded in getting them to use it against each other. But this is... And most importantly of all, we build specifically because of our tragedy. We use our pain, we use the tragedy, we use the sight, we use the gevura as a springboard for growth. In Bandai, what this means specifically is that something incredible needs to be built at that site, as close as possible to the place of the actual pogrom. Something that reflects the sacrifice of those who lived there and those who died there, al Kiddush Hashem, and something that brings a light to a dark place. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's something that I think everybody in this room should be thinking about, because you don't live that far from there. We need to do things here, but we need to do things there specifically. Something there needs to be not a monument, but a movement on top of that site. More. Fantastic, that's a good start.
Which has been launched by the
Tefillin booth. These are fantastic things. I think we should do more. Add another one. Why not add another one? Anyway, I'll take your questions in a moment. But in conclusion, this is how the Jewish people view tragedy. This is how the Rebbe has taught us to view tragedy, to use it as a springboard for greater growth, and to recognize that one day Hashem is going to remove all of our tears, that one day Hashem is going to explain to us everything bad that ever happened and show us that it is good. I'm wishing us all comfort. I'm wishing us all a blessing, that we should see the good in everything immediately, and that all of the sick should be healed, all of the Kadeshim should return to us in physical bodies with the coming of Mashiach. We should all be rejoined with our loved ones, and that all Jewish suffering should come to the culmination of Jewish celebration with the coming of Mashiach. Thank you. There are a bunch of questions. Rabbi, is there any reason for me not to take questions? Because we don't have anything after, right?
One question was, can the rabbis speak a bit slower?
Yeah, probably not. All the rabbi can really do is repeat himself and pause a lot. All the way in the back in the blue. Yes. There are many things I didn't mention. I'd love to address that. Here's the question. I have to repeat it into the microphone because people didn't hear. But the question was that something going around the internet right now is this needs to be a wake-up call to Jews who are living in exile, who are living out here in the diaspora, to return to Israel. That's not correct. It's not correct. I'll tell you this. If you believe that you should be in the land of Israel, there are many good reasons to go there. There's many good reasons to make aliyah. If a person is keeping Torah and mitzvahs, and they would like to keep them more fully in the land, and they're not responsible for people over here, and they're mashpia, they're rav, things would be good for them, there are a lot of good reasons to make aliyah. The worst reason to make aliyah is because you don't believe that God will protect you. One of the key ingredients to being a Jew in Israel is that the land of Israel has this is a Rashi on Chumash, the land of Israel has a sensitive stomach. It's like a princess. A person does a sin in the land of Israel, they get spit out of the land. The land of Israel is not tolerant of a lack of faith or a lack of observance in it. In Chutz La'aretz, out here, the land is like a person who eats out of the garbage all the time. People sin and it doesn't kick them out. But in the land of Israel, Israel cannot tolerate a lack of faith. One of the worst things a person could do is display their lack of trust in God by moving to Israel. That's one of the fastest ways to get spat out. So the reason, moving to Israel because you do not believe that God will protect you no matter where you are and that God's got your back and that God runs the entire world, I think is proof. If somebody moves to Israel for that reason, I think that's proof they're not ready to move to Israel yet. Israel's a land of people who trust in God. Can I tell you a story very quickly? I want to tell you a story. The Avrocher, the holy Avrocher, the Bas Ayin.
Could you ask the men to be quiet?
Men! They're done with me. The holy Avrocher, the Bas Ayin, he moved to Tzfas. And when he moved to Tzfas, he was initially so disappointed by the Jews living in Tzfas that he decided he was going to leave Tzfas. He moved to the Holy Land expecting to meet holy, self-actualized, passionate people, and they're just so normal. They weren't sinners, but they were so normal, and he couldn't stand it. He was not normal. He was a big tzaddik. Came from a town of big tzaddikim, moves to the land of Israel, the Holy Land, and finds normal people there. Drove him crazy. And he writes that he was walking through the city of Tzfat, right after, I believe, right around Sukkot time, walking through the city of Tzfas, and he decides he's going to leave. I'm done with this place. He decides he's going to go back. And remember, this wasn't a plane trip back to Europe. This was a potentially deathly journey. He was so upset at Tzfas that he was ready to brave the 6-month trip back to where he came from. That's how disappointed he was in the holy city. And he says that as he's walking through the streets, he sees that people are running up to the roofs and taking everything off their roof and bringing it into the house. And normally people did this because it was raining. But he looks at the sky and it's blue, no rain. So he goes over to one of these people and says, why is everybody in the entire holy city of Tzfas taking stuff off the roof? And they said back, we just started praying for rain, and we happen to know that when a Jew prays for something, God always answers. So we prayed for rain and immediately took stuff off our roof because we're sure it's going to rain. And indeed, a couple moments later, it started raining. And the Avrocher said, there's something special about people who live in this land. A person who is worthy of living in the land of Israel, one of the first requirements for that worthiness is that they believe that God runs the world, is taking care of everyone, and that they don't have to be afraid no matter where they are. Which means that if you ask me about the philosophy that because bad things are happening here, I should move to Israel, I would say that's one of the only disqualifying statements I could hear for Aliyah. I think it's disqualifying. I think somebody who moves to Israel for that reason specifically should not move to Israel. They're not ready. They're not ready to live like someone in Tzfat who takes their stuff off the roof when it rains. The kind of people that Israel is made for are people who believe that God's got our back everywhere. That something that isn't supposed to happen can't happen. that God runs the entire world. So no, it's completely wrong. It's completely wrong. There are many great reasons to move to Israel. It's our holy land. It's our home. I just got back from there. I got to tell you, I've never felt so strongly connected to the land as I do right now. I'm on fire at the moment. It's our holy land. I'm expecting Mashiach to come and bring me there. I'm so excited about Eretz HaKodesh, about the holy land. But going there because you're running away from going there because you're afraid that God doesn't protect you enough here in Australia, that's not Jewish. That's non-Jewish. And non-Jewish ideologies do not belong in the land of Israel. I think it's disqualifying. I really do. Yeah.
What would the Rebbe say about things like the memorials, like the March for the Living?
What would the Rebbe say about memorials like the March for the Living? I can't know. You can never know what the Rebbe would say about anything, but I'll tell you based on many, many letters and sichas what I firmly believe the Rebbe would say. That's the best I can tell you, what I think, right? What I think is worth what it sounds like. The Rebbe, as a rule, is not a fan of showing stuff without doing. He wants show and do. So if a person is marching and not doing, I think the Rebbe, generally speaking, is deeply against it. The marching that comes with doing, the Rebbe is a big fan of. So if March for the Living is accompanied by an increase in Torah and mitzvahs because of that, then we have real good reason for it. If it's accompanied only by a sense of national solidarity, collective mourning and memory, not so much. I want to tell you a really interesting letter from the Rebbe about the Western Wall. This is a mind-blowing letter. Somebody writes to the Rebbe saying that they're going to go visit the Western Wall, the Kotel, the Kaisal Maravi. They're going to visit the Western Wall. And the Rebbe writes back, no point in going unless you're going to do something about it. The Rebbe says, people go to the Western Wall all the time to see what Jewish history used to be like 2,000 years ago, and that is worthless. Worthless. But when somebody goes to the Kaisam Aravi, looks at what Jewish life was like 2,000 years ago, and resolves based on that to be the Jewish future and to be the next chapter in the story, the Western Wall has meaning. I mean, we do not believe in visiting places of Jewish history and, God forbid, Jewish tragedy for the purposes of knowing the history and knowing the tragedy. We believe in going to these places to springboard off of them to be the Jewish future. So when there's a march that's there because we need to know that this bad thing happened once, to never forget is vastly overrated if you can't tell me what you're going to do with it. Never forget and therefore I'm putting on tefillin. Fantastic. Never forget and therefore I'm lighting Shabbos candles. Fantastic. Never forget and therefore I never forget? Not Jewish. Non-Jewish. Goyish. So the way that a Jew, I'll take her in a second, yes. The way that a Jew responds to things like March of the Living and the like is, it depends on what you're doing with it, really. If going to these sites, if going to Auschwitz, I think I have a picture on the screen somewhere of people putting on tefillin on the train tracks in Auschwitz. Yeah, if that's what you're doing there, that's a great march. If you're doing a mitzvah, if you're making the world better, if you're making the world brighter, if you're becoming a better Jew and making the world better because of it, fantastic. But a lot of these things, they're there because it is easy to sell. It's an easy sell. Jewish tragedy is a real easy sell among Jews, and we shouldn't take the easy way out. We should never take the easy way out. If we're marching for something, we better be able to tell God what we're doing with it. Otherwise, don't march.
Remind us that what Amalek did and can prevent it from happening.
That's right. And the way that we prevent things from happening is specifically through Torah and mitzvahs, rededication to Torah and mitzvahs. Anybody who goes on a trip to the Holocaust lands and doesn't come out with a achlata, they shouldn't have gone. Yes, all the way in the back. I'm sorry if you've waited so long. I may need some help with the...
What do you say about Ayin Hara?
What do I say about Ayin Hara? We'll talk about it. The rabbi says we should talk about that one later because it's a little off topic. Yes, Rabbi? Rabbi would like me to address that one later. Anybody else on the topic of this? Yes, sir.
Sorry, just on Tisha B'Av, we don't wait for the next day. On Tisha B'Av, by the afternoon, the Torah and the Mashiach will be booked.
Very well said. Let me emphasize what you just said. I said earlier that we give ourselves 24 hours to mourn every year. We don't even give ourselves that. Already by Mincha, we're talking about the birth of Mashiach and the coming of our redemption. We do not wallow. We have moments in Jewish history where we put our sorrows all in one big bucket, but it's not that long. It's a small part of our year. This is sorrow can be inspiring, but any more than what's needed to inspire us doesn't belong in our Judaism. Well said. Well said. Anybody else?
I think one more. I say do good now, but I just want to say you said do good now means now in what we have to do now. But if in terms of the righteous, if you gave everything on a plate immediately, they wouldn't have time to do the tshuva which is needed to bring the Mashiach.
The Rebbe has told us that we've already done the tshuva needed to bring Mashiach. It's time to just have Mashiach.
But that's the
Mashiach, it's time now. It's time. Lots of the tshuva, lots of the gula never ended, but we've done the tshuva. We've done the tshuva. It's time. It's time for Mashiach to come. Okay? Anybody else? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.